Today, we are going to be making 4-ingredient crackers. You are not going to believe how simple and easy these homemade crackers are, and they only use 4 ingredients. One of those ingredients is water, so really, it's only 3 ingredients. These bake up super fast, less than 15 minutes, and the dough only really takes about 5 minutes. So faster than you can run to the store, you can have delicious homemade crackers with a ton of different flavor variations without any of the processed junk ingredients that you're gonna find in store-bought, and for a fraction of the price. I can't wait to show you my simple trick that will make rolling these babies out so much faster and easier, and they deliver a delicious, crunchy cracker. This cracker recipe is incredibly easy and simple and very, very versatile. As you can see, there really is only 4 ingredients, and the first one of that is flour. So we're going to do 1 1/4 cups of flour, and I am just using all-purpose flour today. This is unbleached organic all-purpose flour from Azure Standard, who is a sponsor of this video. So 1 1/4 cups of flour. This would work just fine though if you have bread flour as well. But it's pretty simple. So here's our base. And then we are going to add, I've got 4 tablespoons of cubed butter here, and we're going to add that to our flour, and we're gonna cut this in. Now, if you have my book, Home and Handmade, which technically releases May 6th of this year, but if you have the older version of Handmade, you will recognize that this is the same base cracker recipe from page 17 in this version, but we are going to be adding cheese to this because I just happen to love cheese. And the kids really love Cheez-Its are like Goldfish crackers. I'm not so crazy about those ingredients, so having a different flavor variation is great to offer them. So today we're gonna be turning this into a cheese variation. So I am simply taking the cubed butter, and I'm just using a pastry cutter here, and I'm just cutting it into the flour so that it is evenly distributed, or as close as possible to being evenly distributed throughout our flour. So what we're after is just getting like pea-sized clumps of the butter into the flour. And so this is pretty quick and fast. You can see I'm almost there. And this is gonna help create some nice flavor and layers on our crackers. Now, I use salted butter. So if you use salted butter and you're adding cheese, the cheese already has some salt in it too. I don't add any additional salt into this recipe. If you're using the non-cheese variation from the book, then you'll add a little bit of salt. Okay, now I've got a 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. We're just gonna get that in there. You can also use cheddar cheese. You can usually really use any flavor of cheese that you want. Parmesan is one of our favorites. Mix the cheese in with the flour. And then we're just gonna add enough water until this holds and comes together as a dough. So I first start with a 1/4 cup flour, and we'll see if that's enough. And then I've got a little bit extra in here if we need it. So I'm just gonna stir and see if this starts to come together. So you can see that is definitely, it's starting to hold. Might need to add a little bit more flour, but I'm gonna see if when I clump it like this, if it holds, and not quite. So that's a sign we need to add a little bit more water still. So I'm just gonna do about 2 tablespoons there. And then we'll start to mix that up. And then we're gonna take the dough, we're gonna squeeze it, and we're gonna see if this holds. And this is actually starting to hold and come together. So I'm not gonna add any more water. I'm just gonna kind of work this dough with my hands and incorporate some of the drier parts until it starts to come together as one whole dough ball. You can see it's just kind of like basically I'm squeezing it together and picking up any pieces that are falling out until it's one full ball. There we go. So there are lots of ways that you can roll out your cracker dough, but I have found the actual easiest way to do this is to just put it right onto your baking sheet, right onto your cookie sheet. You'll see where people roll them out on silicone mats or use parchment paper and then transfer them, but these do not ever stick for me, and this just eliminates the need for using any type of paper and transferring any of that. And you want to roll this as thin as possible so that you get crispy crackers. So I've got my rolling pin here. I'm just gonna kind of push this together a little bit more into that dough ball. And if I need to sprinkle it with a little bit of water, you can definitely do that. But I think we're gonna be pretty good here. So I'm just gonna take the palm of my hand and kind of flatten this out a little bit. Like I said, if you see any dry pockets of flour, which I don't, you can always just take a little bit of water with your finger and just kind of dab it on there. What I actually have is little bits of Parmesan that are just popping out. Okay, so now we're gonna roll this out as thin as possible. Your goal is to try to get this rolled out to about 1/16 of an inch. And you want to press a little harder on the center as you're pulling and pushing that out. You will still usually have the edges be a little bit thinner, but I'm going to show you a trick to that during baking so that you get evenly baked crackers. So the goal is to try and roll this into a rectangle or square, but I don't worry too much if it's exact. Okay, so now I like to use a pizza cutter. You could use a knife if you want, but I find the pizza cutter is easier to cut and roll. And we're gonna shape our crackers. Now you could do them in all kinds of fancy things if you want. If you wanted to square up the edges, you could. I don't really want to waste any of the dough, and I don't really care if I've got super nice, neat edges. They still taste great all the same. So I'm just gonna go through here. These are approximate 1-inch strips. And then back this way. So to help these not puff up when they're baking, because we want them to stay flat and crispy and crunchy for our crackers, I just take a fork and I'm going to go through and poke 4 holes right in the center. And I kind of wiggle it back just a little bit to make sure that those holes go all the way to the bottom. And this is going to help them not puff up as much. Okay, so now we're gonna pop these into the oven. We've preheated it to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're gonna bake these for 10 minutes, and then we'll check on them. So at 10 minutes, I pull the crackers out, and you'll see the thin ones on the edge, like these are all starting to brown. So what I do is just pop these off so that they don't burn. And then we'll stick it back in so that all of these in the center can continue to get nice and crispy and brown up as well. Right, so now I'm going to put these back in the oven for about 2 to 4 minutes until they've all got nice and golden brown. Okay, so now you can see that we've got golden all over, a little bit more still. I was a little bit pressing harder on the outside edges, but we're pretty even golden. Now, if you use like cheddar cheese that is yellow, then it will change the color depending on the type of cheese that you use. But because of the fat and the cheese and the butter, you will see some browning. And so we know that they're done. But I actually find that the crackers crisp up more if you leave them to cool on the pan. So I'm just kind of loosening some of my edges here, but I'm gonna let these stay on the pan to cool before, I move them off. The great thing about these is if you just put them like in a mason jar and put just a used canning lid and band and tighten them down, or you could put them like in a Ziploc, basically an airtight container. They will last and stay crunchy and crispy. I eat them so fast though here. They usually don't last more than 2 days. So I have tried to have really good willpower and have made it to about 3 or 4 days with a batch before we finished them all. And they have still been crispy at that point as well. But be forewarned, you may need to make a double batch if you want to have crackers on hand more than a couple of days, because they really are that good. So these have fully cooled on the pan. One of my favorite ways to store these is to just put them in a wide mouth quart-sized mason jar. And you can see once they've cooled, these are popping off really easy. You don't even have to grease the pan. Works really well. You can grab the printable version of this on my website, as well as check out the other video for a non-cheese variation, but still equally delicious, of these homemade crackers.